Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding and Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And my guest today is Jamie M. Lima. He's a certified divorce financial analyst, a certified financial planner, and he's also the founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions and the Secure Split app. Drawing both on his professional experience and personal experience with divorce, Jamie helps mid-career professionals navigate the financial complexities of divorce from asset division to retirement planning. Welcome, Jamie Lima, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I noticed in your bio your own personal experience with divorce, and I also have personal experience with divorce that I really think has driven my career, and I'm very grateful to my first marriage, not only for my two children that I have from that, but also for the launch into the career. So if you don't mind, can you give us a little bit of an insight into what your experience is and how it informs what you do?
Yeah, I think if you go way back in the time machine, so to speak, I mean, I'm the product of a divorce. My parents were divorced when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I really feel like that's the driver in many ways for me to get into the world of finance, because I saw how really challenging it was for my parents to go through that experience, even at a young age. I was picking up on it, how incredibly challenging it was for both parents. My mother was working multiple jobs, my dad was working multiple jobs just to be able to help keep a roof over both houses at that point. And my own divorce 7 or 8 years ago now is kind of, it was almost like a proving ground to me that people need help on the financial side of divorce, because excuse me, even as a financial planner at that stage, I still made mistakes along the way. So the average person who doesn't have the hands-on experience, the education, and the background in the world of finance is certainly going to make some mistakes along the way, or potentially make some mistakes along the way. And I really feel like you're on this mission to help people divorce in a much better way. I too am on a mission to do basically the same thing on the financial side. Right? Let's make sure it's fair and equitable, to make sure that everybody gets their fair shake, but we do it the right way, and there aren't a lot of missteps along the way as well.
Yeah, I have to say I made some mistakes in my own divorce too. I mean, one of those being is that not recognizing how one's priorities shift throughout the divorce process. You come in thinking, I want to hold on to the life as I knew it. I just don't want to have my husband as part of that life, right? Like I don't want to live with a guy. I mean, and
Yeah.
so like I'm holding on, and that can have some financial implications, right? And then once you like get a little bit further into it, you're like, wait a second, maybe these other things are more important than holding on to what I had before. I mean, I don't know if that resonates for you.
Absolutely. And I think when one of the first exercises that we go through with all of our clients is we'll sit down and outline what the goals are for this outcome, and what do they want their life to look like after the dust settles on the divorce. Do they want to buy a new house? Do they want to move to a new city? Do they want to put the kids through college? Whatever it is, because I am a financial planner by trade. I've been doing that work for 20 years. So there's that element of financial planning along with the strategy, negotiations, and the analysis that we do within the divorce. And I think if we're going through that experience, a lot of these clients realize there are some things that I definitely want to make sure I hold on to along the way, and I'm going to die on that hill to try to hold on to those things. And then maybe through that experience to recognize, there's some things that I thought I wanted, but I don't really need to battle and duke this out for it. Sometimes it's eye opening.
Can you give some examples, Jamie, so that our listeners have an idea of what you're talking about?
Well, the first one is usually the house. The first thing I thought about when those words are coming out of my mouth is, a lot of people want to hold on to the house, and they want to feel that way. They do that for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because they don't want to take the kids out of their schools, or there's another emotional attachment to the home. And if they let go of the house, it becomes like they've just totally given up, and they don't want to do that. It could be a variety of other reasons, right? But if you look at the house, our job is to take them through and help them understand, like, what is it going to take to keep the house? the maintenance and all the upkeep and the property taxes and the mortgage and all the stuff that goes on, the water heater breaks, how are you going to fix it? All of those things come into play. And if you just think them through, sometimes it's not advantageous to keep the house. Sometimes it's better to just say, all right, let's just sell it. Let's benefit from a tax perspective, because if you sell the house as a married couple, you get a $500,000 tax exemption on capital gains versus 250,000 if you're a single person selling that property. A lot of the times we'll help our clients come to that reasoning or that epiphany, so to speak. And through the process of divorce, we can help them sell it. They benefit from a tax perspective and they can move on to the next phase, because it's not always about the emotional piece of it's great. But if you think through it pragmatically, it's not always wise.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to hold on to was this idea. I was living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan at the time that I got divorced, and I'm like, well, I'm going to keep this big apartment. And my ex-husband said to me, well, where am I going to live? And I said, well, I think you should buy an apartment in a building like this building that I mentioned. And he actually did, went and bought an apartment in that building. And then
Wow.
after he moved out, I went there to pick up the kids or drop them off or something, not that far away. And I looked around his apartment. I'm like, I should have done this. This is so much more manageable. It's not gigantic. If I put my keys down somewhere, not the usual place, I'm going to be able to find them. It's not that much to clean. It's a way less expensive. Anyway, so and longtime listeners to the show will have heard me tell that story before, but what you think you want is really, I think it really takes an examining of your values. What are you really trying to achieve? And rather than, otherwise the tail wags the dog, right? Well, I want to hold on to the house in order to achieve this thing. If you think about it the other way, what am I really trying to achieve? Financial stability for us, being able to have time with the kids, being able to go on vacation or whatever it is, and then work your options from what it is you're trying to achieve instead of backwards. I think people get to a much better place. What do you think?
I agree. And people always forget this. And it's our job to remind them in this conversation and in future conversations that this is an opportunity for you to reinvent yourself in many ways. You get a clean slate, you get a fresh break, you can be whoever you want to be. That was the most liberating aspect of my divorce. My divorce was very challenging. It was not amicable, not by my doing, but I didn't get that choice. But unfortunately, the most liberating aspect of it was I can now do all the things that I want to do. I have a clean slate and I can basically create any future version of me that I want to. And that's been a huge blessing to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
had I wanted to hold on to some of these things that I just let go, I don't know if I could have done that.
I love that. I always say to my clients that divorce is at the intersection between what was and what will be. And it's your choice how to get on the road to what will be, and to what will be you're going to be, right? And so let's get really clear on what really matters. And a lot of times, we get married much younger in life. We have this vision of what our life should be, what our goals should be. And then you live it a little bit, Jamie, and you're like, hold
Yeah,
on a second. And you actually have a chance when you get divorced to reevaluate and refocus on your new goals and your new objectives, your new priorities that are really much more in alignment with who you really are, not who you think you should be.
absolutely. Because we all change over time and we learn new things and we have different likes and dislikes, and being able to just like, again, reinvent yourself in so many ways is a huge opportunity.
It is. So let's get back to how financial planning can help
Yeah.
with that. So obviously that is one big element of what we're talking about here. So you have a background helping managing high wealth for high net worth families. You have a background at Morgan Stanley and Fidelity. So what are the lessons that you learned in that world that you bring into the Allegiant Divorce Solutions and the work that you're doing now with divorcing couples?
Well, there's a lot. Having those experiences in traditional financial planning, wealth management, investment management environments allows me to bring a whole set of skills to the table, so to speak, when we're working with these clients that are going through a divorce. Because there are CDFAs out there, the certified divorce financial analysts like myself, that maybe they had a couple of years of doing that work, or maybe they worked as an admin person and on a team there, but they don't actually have the literally like the day-to-day hands-on experience of working with people to help them build retirement plans and look at investment strategy, all those things. Bringing that to the table allows me to see things through a different lens, and it also helps me understand when we are talking about who's going to get what might be most advantageous for our clients to ask for or to give up, because we understand, not what you talked about, the goals and objectives that these folks have. We understand how keeping something or giving up something or investing in a different way or handling taxes in a particular way can impact their future financial plans. So again, there's that element of we have to make the decision here and now. Are we making good, practical, pragmatic decisions within the divorce? Because there's a lot of decisions you have to make when you're going through a divorce. But how do those decisions then impact me 5, 10, 20 years into the future? And that's where having that background and experience as a financial planner, certified financial planner, allows me to look at things through that lens and help people. Again, going back to our earlier conversation, like we may coach somebody to do something that they hadn't thought about because we know what the impact's going to be on down the line. And a lot of that is taxes and future financial planning that client, their future financial planning needs that client has.
I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Jamie Lima about financial planning and divorce. And obviously, finances are a big piece of the divorce process. So for people who are mid-career and the professionals facing divorce, what do you think some of the most common financial pitfalls that they should know about so they can avoid them?
A lot of it has to do with the workplace benefits that these folks receive. And when you look at a mid-career professional, this is not somebody that's just getting started. They've been married for like a year or two and they're just, trying to build in their career. We're talking about somebody that spent 10, 20 years within their career. And these are not just the only people that we work with. We do work with people from all different shapes and sizes in all different states. We work across the country in all 50 states. But if you're looking at the people that are mid-career, director level and above within a major organization or maybe even a private company, you're going to have things like stock options, restricted stock units, deferred compensation plans, maybe even some pension plans. We see a lot of pension plans. In my traditional wealth management days, we didn't see a lot of that because I'm not really sure what the reason is, but in this particular space, we see a lot of pensions. So it gets a little more complex, right? You're not just dividing who's going to how we're going to handle the house and a couple cars. Now you're dealing with brokerage accounts and retirement plans, and they probably use a tax professional to get their taxes done. So we have to coordinate with that tax professional to ensure we're making good decisions there. It just tends to get and listeners know, as they grow in their career and they continue to build wealth, it gets more complicated. Let's just face it. And I think that's where those mid-career professionals have some challenges because they can't just go down to the courthouse, decide to divide everything at 50-50 and walk away. There's much more complexity to it.
Yes. And I think that sometimes there is a misconception that if something is not yet vested, that it is not worth anything, which is not true. Or the idea that when it does vest, it'll be divided equally, which is also maybe not true. And so there's a lot of nuance that goes into those complex compensation vehicles that involves taxes and all kinds of things. And so it really does help not to consult Professor Internet on this and really talk to someone who really does understand it. Even if it costs you a few $100s to do that, it is totally worth it to find out.
This is not a decision you want ChatGPT helping you with.
Definitely not. Well, at least not yet. And another thing that I think is really interesting is that a lot of people who work in financial services, when they're mid-career and they're thinking, my career is maybe shorter than somebody who works in a different field, right? Because people who are really starting to make the big bucks in financial services, that isn't going to last till they're right. Whereas if you're a psychologist, maybe it is, right? You're totally fine. Or a teacher, those are kinds of things. And so I think a lot of times, and Jamie, let me know if you agree with this, a lot of times people in that view say, listen, I am going to be fine in life so long as I get to X dollars. If I can sock away X dollars in asset or net worth, then I can retire at 55. I'm making this up, but it's not crazy talk. I hear this. And we're getting divorced. Yeah. So getting divorced, then people think, oh my gosh, now I'm dividing the money that I've made already. So what does that mean in terms of my retirement? What does that mean in terms of my job security and the fear that I have about losing my job. So what do you say to people like that?
This is a perfect example. Think about it this way. We'll just use an easy example. If you have $1 million in your 401k and you get divorced and that those assets were earned and accumulated over the lifetime of your marriage, your $1 million account is now $500,000 because you're going to give half to your soon-to-be ex-spouse. And then you need to take taxes out of that balance when you start taking distributions out. So simple math says that my $1 million account could easily be worth $300,000 when all is said and done. And that depends on what tax bracket you're in when you start taking distributions out. So you're right. I mean, we see this all the time. I've had clients that have retired at 45 and 50 because they've been diligent savers and they don't spend a lot of money. But that can all change. That can all be disrupted when you now go from dividing up those assets and you splitting those assets in half, and then also having the added expense of now having to support yourself or maybe even another household, which is effectively what I did in my own divorce. I had to I pay alimony and child support, basically supporting another household for years. And that's going to impact your ability to retire for sure, and move that goalpost further out because you may have to work longer or take on another job or consult in retirement or whatever, but it's going to definitely change the landscape.
So what do you say, Jamie, to someone who's listened to this and it's going into a panic? I'm really unhappily married, but oh my gosh, can I afford to get divorced?
We get that question a lot. And it's a lot of, am I going to be okay? And before you decide to drop the dreaded D word and ask for the divorce and start filing papers and calling an attorney, do not call an attorney first. Do not call an attorney. You should be calling someone like us because we can review what you have. We can look at the state you're in and the rules that are around asset division and alimony and child support, those types of things. We have a free calculator that people can use. They can go to our website and use a free calculator to run their numbers and see really where they stand. And I think just sometimes having that education up front versus going in saying, I want a divorce, let's start the process, let's hire an attorney, and then you get into it. Then you find out that it's going to be a gigantic disaster and you should have planned better. Planning first is essential when you're going in through a divorce, especially if you have some real assets that are at stake. And we can come in, we can triage the situation, get an understanding of what's at risk, and help you put a planner in place around that. And really, sometimes it's just about, okay, can I live with what the potential outcome before you start making that leap?
Yeah. And if I could also add to it that the way that you get divorced is going to impact the outcome probably more than any other decision you make during the divorce process. So what do I mean by that? 97% of divorces in New York settle before a judge makes a decision after a trial. Nationwide, it's 95%. So you're probably going to settle. And the way, so if you think, well, it's not whether or not I'm going to settle, it's how that decision where you can really work together to find a mutually beneficial resolution can have a huge impact on whether that's in mediation or collaborative law or some kind of negotiation outside of the court system. You're going to be in a lot more control of the outcome than you are if you just burn it down.
100%. And I'm a certified mediator myself. I actually have a mediation case coming on board this afternoon after this conversation. And that is the prime way to do this. I mean, we're getting people divorced and including the documents that they're going to need to get divorced for under $2,000. Yeah. There's no reason for it. If you can work with the other side and you're not asking for the moon and you're willing to negotiate. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some cases that just won't work. You can tell by the relationship and the conversation and how that goes. Sometimes it's just not going to work. But if you can get both sides to come into an agreement, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because when I talk to people about what goes into divorce, I say, okay, you need a parenting plan, separate and apart from money. You need to divide up your assets and your liabilities, but that doesn't necessarily mean whacking it up tomorrow after you sell everything. There's an element of time that goes into these negotiations. And it could be time because you have a deferred compensation or retirement asset, or because you decide you're going to hold on to the house or something like that so let the kids graduate from high school. So that could be that. And then you need a cash flow plan. So I don't like to talk about alimony or maintenance or child support or whatever the legal language is in the jurisdiction where the listeners might be sitting as they listen to this. but really it is a pragmatic problem to solve. How are we going to pay the bills that we're going to have living separately when we lose the economies of scale? And it sounds like you have a similar approach.
100%. And we get these comments on TikTok and other social media platforms like, oh, the answer is not to get married, or alimony is a ripoff, or whatever, pick your silly comment. But the reality is, and as someone who paid it for 6 years, and it wasn't a small amount of money either, there's a reason for it. Both parties are allowed to rehabilitate their life, right? And that is what spousal support, alimony, whatever your jurisdiction calls it. But you're right, it's the cash flow. Like, how do we get enough cash flow going into both homes for everyone to be able to, first off, to make sure the kids are taken care of if there are kids involved, but secondarily, to give the benefit of time to be able to, for that other person, the out spouse, so to speak, to be able to get back on his or her feet. And that's really what it's all about. But it is rehabilitative. It is not, in many states now, I don't know about New York at this point, but in many states that we work in, it's not as long as people think.
No,
either.
it's not. And some states are very reluctant to give it at all, which I think
Texas,
is also,
yeah. If you don't want to have to pay alimony, you should be getting divorced in Texas or Florida.
Exactly. But getting your spouse to move there might not be so easy.
Exactly. Yep.
You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Please subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous podcast episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Jamie Lima about financial planning through divorce and what to think about. So, Jamie, if people want to find out more about what you do and how to reach you, how can they do that?
Best way is to go to the website, allegiantds.com, which I'm sure you're going to put in the show notes, but allegiantds.com has all of our contact information there. You can book a call. It's complimentary, confidential. We're not gonna sell your information either, so you can book a call with us just to see if it might be a fit. I did mention that toolkit a short while ago, which is the calculators that we've developed for folks to be able to use. So if you want to check out those calculators, folks can go to toolkit.securesplit.com, which is our kind of a sister or a junior version of our professional calculators that are coming out in the spring next year. But you can go in, you get free alimony calculator, child support calculations. There's a budget tooling in there, and there's some premium calculators that folks can pay for if things are a little more complex. But those are the two sites that I would direct everybody to.
Great. Well, tell us about the Secure Split app. I know you've developed that to try to help people navigate divorce more effectively. So what is it and how does it work?
There are two versions of it. One is a consumer-based version, which is what I just mentioned, which we're calling the toolkit, the divorce toolkit. And we look at things like dividing up retirement accounts, the tax impact on decisions that people have to make. I mentioned the alimony, child support, and budgeting calculators that are in there. It's all about education, right? My job, I feel like you and I, just after having this brief conversation here, I can tell you're an educator as well. And really that's what it's about, is giving people the tools and resources that they need, because this stuff doesn't exist. They certainly don't teach you this stuff in school. So if we can educate people on how to prepare financially for divorce, we've done our job. There's a professional version of this software coming out this spring, which will be designed for attorneys, mediators, and certified divorce financial analysts like ourselves to be able to go in and really do true financial planning with our clients. We'll be able to gather the financial information from the clients. They're going to be able to link their accounts so we can see up-to-date real-time values of their accounts. If anybody's gone through a divorce and knows someone who's gone through a divorce, you know that there are a lot of financial reporting that you have to do to the courts, financial affidavits that you have to share with the courts. We'll be able to generate those reports for attorneys and some other important forms for professionals. We'll be able to divide up assets, look at tax impact, budgeting tools, cash flow analysis, like all the stuff that professionals will need to guide their clients through this experience, and do so in a clean interface. What's available right now is very outdated, very archaic, and most folks are relegated to spreadsheets because the software is so bad. So we're trying to change the name of the game and how people do their work on the professional side as well.
Jamie, money is so much more in our society than a way to pay the bills. It is power, it's prestige, it's a way that we compare ourselves to our families of origins, our neighbors, and each other. And when people have a really different money mindset, for lack of a better word, a really different approach to money, What is your experience of how that impacts the conflict that they have around financial issues or around any?
We all have our own money scripts. My experience, and I'll just share it with you because we're friends now. I mean, I've always had a scarcity mindset. I've always felt like no matter how much money I make, it's never going to be enough because I'm going to be destitute and living under a bridge tomorrow. And I think a lot of that comes stemming from watching my parents struggle so hard when I was a kid in trying to make ends meet. And whether that's your experience too, and you're feeling the same way that I feel, or there's a different money script at play. Maybe you're not the decision maker with family home and you have concerns about being able to make financial decisions. All of these experiences we have all of our money scripts and impact our relationship with money, how we feel about it, how we use it, how we save it, how we handle decisions around money. And we as financial planners, and I've trained other financial advisors on this over my career of being able to help other people understand what that person's money script is and helping them use that to their advantage in some ways by making decisions through the divorce. But it certainly comes to play. Absolutely.
Yeah, and another thing that I think happens is that sometimes there is a division of roles and responsibilities in a couple, and one person, and historically and traditionally it's the man, but that is definitely changing very
Mm-hmm.
rapidly now, where one person has a real kind of grasp of the family finances and the other person doesn't. And the person who doesn't feels afraid, especially if that person is not the person choosing the divorce. It's a combination of feeling really out of control about what's happening in my lifestyle and also out of control of the finances. So, how can people get more educated? And there's also a lot of suspicion, like, oh, the
Mm-hmm.
person who does know, well, if they go to tell me, they're going to spin it or they're going to take
Yeah.
advantage of me or something like that. And I think that can sometimes cause unnecessary conflict. And I'm wondering what your experience is of that and how you can help people with it.
My experience is exactly what you just mentioned. Usually there's the family CFO, and historically, and not to be sexist, but historically it's been the man. And you are doing your family a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not paying attention to what's going on. So if you have a financial advisor and your husband's usually the person that's goes and talks to him or her and talks about investments and whatnot, jump in the car and go with him. And you have to be involved in these conversations, especially if you're preparing or you're contemplating divorce. Now is the time to start thinking through organizing that financial information. What do we have coming in? What do we have going out? What have we saved so far? And what do we owe? Right. So it's income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. And if you can just understand where you stand, what the lay of the land looks like in those four categories, you're light years ahead of a lot of the people that we work with. And you
Yeah.
have to be involved in these conversations because burying your head in the sand is going to do nothing but come back and haunt you later.
Well, what if someone is thinking, when people start talking about money, I hear Charlie Brown's teachers. Is
Yeah.
there a way that somebody can make it so accessible for themselves emotionally? I mean, I think every listener is capable of understanding these, but sometimes people have a fear about it.
In this day, in the old days, I would have said, let's go to YouTube, and there's a lot of educational advice out there. There's a lot of videos that are out there that can give you elementary level understanding of some of these concepts, like what is a stock, what is a bond, what is a money market fund. Those like very basic things are easy for me because I've been doing this for 20 years, but not easy for everybody. So I would say use your resources. That's my go-to motto. Use your resources, whether it's YouTube or Google or whatever. But you could simply go to Chat GPT today and say, you're my financial advisor. Talk to me like a 5-year-old. We own these 10 things. Or upload if you're comfortable with taking a little bit of a risk from a information sharing perspective, you could simply upload the statement to ChatGPT and have ChatGPT tell you like a 5-year-old what you own. So there's in this day and age, there's really no excuse not to have that understanding. And yes, I get it. My wife, she's an RN. She's been doing that work for 25 years at this stage. When we talk about money and these types of things, eyes gloss over, and I get it. But she also takes an active approach to understanding what's coming in, what's going out. In a lot of ways, she handles all of our finances because of that. So there's really no excuse, and especially with all the resources that are available these days.
I agree. All right, in the last minute or two of the show, what if you had to give one piece of financial advice to someone thinking about or just beginning the divorce process? What would that be?
I would go back to what I said just a short while ago, which is get your ducks in a row and use your resources, start organizing everything. If you're contemplating divorce and you are not the financial decision making person, you should be setting up a Google Drive or a OneDrive or whatever Apple has. And as those statements come in, we start saving copies of that into that document folder. And you could do that over a 6-month time frame. Save your electric bill, your gas bill, your cable bill, your cell phone bill. Like, start saving all that information, because your financial person, like myself, is going to need it anyway when we start the divorce process. It's very difficult to sit down on, you decide you want a divorce, you sit down on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, and then by midnight, you finally have organized all that financial information. Trying to do it in one day is going to be impossible.
And you're going to hate it.
And you're going to hate it. It's not going to be impossible, but you're going to hate it. And, you'll be doing it for a while because there is a lot of stuff to gather. You could, if you did it piecemeal and did it slowly over time. Also, if there's financial abuse going on where you may eventually get locked out of some of these accounts because your soon to be ex-spouse decides he or she wants to change the passwords on you, you've already gathered the information you need. Yeah. So use your resources, start early, and leverage a financial person like ourselves to help you just try to make a plan accordingly.
I think that's great advice. Jamie Lima, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.